Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu salam ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Andrama, my brothers and sisters in the Full B community. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Lilikwani wati fi din wa salamu ala mani taba huda. Lilikwani wa wati fi Frikia, Europa, Kula Macan, America, Caribbean. My dear brothers and sisters, this is probably short notice, of course. I've been doing things like this lately, and I wanted to talk about a subject that is very complex, and also is fast moving. And we're talking about the Sahel and Russia, Russia's involvement. And I'll get into this because they are now entering into the fray. And what is the ramifications for the brothers and sisters in the Sahel region and Africa in particular? And I wanted to also say that my community, the Full Big community, has been hit hard as we speak. And as you know, the latest is going on in the Sahel region. Again, as you heard me talk about the last couple of weeks, it's fast moving. You go to sleep at night, you wake up, suddenly there's a eruption of some sort. Look at Sudan. Sudan has erupted into something. I'll get into that another day, inshallah ta'ala bi'ithnillah. But today I'm going to concentrate on this particular topic. I have to talk about this because it's important. And again, we have some of the same entities that have been causing problems for 400 years on the continent is involved in this as well. And so I'm going to get into that. And again, brothers and sisters, this is mainly for those who want well-rounded education as far as about Africa and your relationship with Africa and what's going on the ground in Africa. Because especially those in the West, they're quite ignorant, believe it or not, they're quite ignorant of the African landscape. They don't understand what's going on. Now they're starting to wake up because we have brothers and sisters who have taken DNA in America and the Caribbean in particular, and they're starting to awaken, so to speak, to find out about their heritage, and they've learned about their heritage. And so now they're starting to find interest in Africa. And I'm going to tell you something. We have shown, if you listen to one talk in Arabic, we call khutbah. I talked about the relationship between Africa and the African Americans in particular inside the United States. If Africa is free and healthy, the African American will be free and healthy because he will have an access and a place to go. And see, this is to the chagrin of the Americans because they don't want to see us go. I talked about those issues before, but I'm not going to get into that right now. But Africa is a hotbed of activity all over the place. And we have all of the European Tuba powers coming into the landscape, African landscape, and it's causing a lot of problems. So this situation here, brothers and sisters, is complex in the sense that is a lot of talk is not being, banded out about Russia and what's Russia's role, especially in the Sahel region, because we know about the Americans and we know about the French, being in the Sahel region and so forth and so on. But Russia has been coming under the radar, so to speak, and it's surprising. President Putin has been making his rounds. He's been on TV talking about his role that he wants to play inside Africa, and we've seen African leaders also embracing him as well. And we know that he was on TV and the other day here, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, saying that he canceled the African debt. Now, this is very interesting. Now, the Americans have never done this. The French hasn't done this. The British hasn't done this, but the Russians have done this. Okay, so we have different players going on here, and they're all two-bob, but each one has his own good points and bad points. But the good points are far more weighing heavily with the Russian relationship with the Africans than the Americans, because the Africans are running as fast as they can and get away from a smoldering fire called the United States, because it's been involved in Africa for 400 years and it's left a trail of blood, sweat, and anguish through the continent. And this is nothing no one knows about, but we do know that this is a fact. So let's get started with this, brothers and sisters. Here's a map here I wanted to show you. What is interesting, you see the brown dots here. This is Russia's now escalation into the fray into the Sahel region. And also you see North Africa. But if you notice something here up to your left hand corner, where I live in Al-Maghrib, everything again is in Arabic language, because this is, I'm in Morocco, I'm a Muslim, and we speak Arabic. So this is the preferred language that I like to use. And so I write and speak Arabic language here every single day. So the maps drawn up are in the Arabic language. So that's why so you can understand. But also, if you look at this map, what is interesting here is that the Russians are slowly making its rounds. The brown dots are the Russians and their involvement. The Russians are in Libya, which is to your north. If you look up there to your north, and then you say Algeria, if you know anything about Africa, you kind of know, even if you don't understand the Arabic, you say Algeria. But you notice something is missing here, which is very interesting. Who is an integral player in this? It's Al-Maghrib, which you call in English Morocco. Al-Maghrib, you don't see a brown dot there, even though Putin has made his rounds with the Moroccan government, with our government here. But they have gotten a relationship, but this has not graduated into the situation you have here. The reason why the Russians are in particular in these regions, because it is hot. And there's a lot of minerals at stake as well. And so this is why this is an important aspect of this to the Bilad es-Sudan. I personally believe, and I hold in my heart, I prefer to use Bilad es-Sudan. Reason why I say that is because Africa is the land of the black man. Okay, so why should we be afraid of calling it for what it is? It's the land of the black man, right? So why are we using all these other names for it? And so we have ancient names as well, but they may not catch on. But Bilad es-Sudan in Arabic mean the land of the black people. I prefer that title, to be honest with you, than Africa. Just like everybody calls the Middle East. I don't like to use that term. I call it Jazira Arab, and this is what many people call it. Why? Because it's the land where the Arabs are. So Jazira Arab is what I call that area, because that's what the Arabs are. Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen. You get the picture. In Iraq. These are Afro-Arabs primarily. So therefore, this is their homeland, and it's Jazira Arab. So I'm going to use Bilad es-Sudan. I'm not going to use Africa, so that way I give you a pretext so you can understand what I'm saying here. Now, if you look here in Bilad Sudan into the north. Again, we see the dots, the brown dots, and they're interesting. You see Sudan. They're in Sudan. If you look to the far right, everybody knows what's going on in Sudan, but you don't hear much right now about the Russians inside Sudan because all of them fighting. They're there. The Americans are there as well. We know that. And I don't want to touch into the situation in Sudan. I will get into that in another day, inshallah ta'ala, and talk about that, because this is very interesting, because this, again, there's a Fulani factor in it. So I just want to, talk about that at a different time. So we see this map again, and the Russians are here, brothers and sisters. They're here. And what makes what makes this so interesting and deadly is that Russia is also coming with its weaponry. And they're taking on the Mujahideen as we speak. So let's get into this here. The Russians, let's be honest, the Russians are a confusing player in the world stage. There's a lot of contradictions here, and it keeps you guessing, and you be scratching your head, because they'll make one move to the right, and then suddenly they'll make a move to the left. But we must talk about Russia, because we must bring the brothers and sisters, the African brothers and sisters, and the brothers and sisters in the West up to speed about Russia. Russia fields the largest Muslim population in Europe. That's fascinating. A lot of people don't know that, but they do. But they have a situation with two of its stronger Muslim states, is Chechnya and Dagestan. Now, what's interesting about this? Everybody knows Louis Farrakhan of Nation Islam. This is not about them, but I want to make a point about something. Even though Chechnya and Dagestan are Tubab, okay, but they are our Muslim brothers, and they have been for centuries. And their jihad is well known. It is very, very strong. If you guys heard this tape of Louis Farrakhan some years back, not that long ago, when he went to Russia and what happened to him, it was very interesting. And he made his rounds there. But there was something that happened in Dagestan that the brothers there were willing to die to protect him, because it was a alleged maybe assassination attempt. And if you look at the tape when he was there in Russia, he explained it very, very well, what happened to them and what happened at the airport. The brothers went to bat there for him. Now, this is Dagestan. This is a Tubab Muslim state, Muslim, within the Russian Federation, okay? And they were ready to go to battle to protect Louis Farrakhan so he can make it home. See, so I wanted to give you that backdrop, why I say we have all the confusion about Russia. And so that is a point that you should not forget about. The Russian leadership, it's reshaping its Islamic thoughts on Islam. Even though, here's the paradox, they're allowing the Muslim migration into Russia, but now they're trying to reshape Islam. There's articles about this, and it's starting to cause problems. At first, they were allowing it just to flourish. But what has happened is, because they've allowed many Muslims to come in, there's been the extremist part of Islam, which I don't like to use the word Wahhab, because that's one of the names of Subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the Wahhabi movements and some of the hardened Salafi movements have started to make way into Russia. And so Russia is trying to figure out how it can keep Islam going, but they don't want the extremism to happen to where Muslims, because you know what's happening in Chechnya. The Chechens, every time there's some jihad, they leave from their area to go into like in Jazeera Arab. They went there, and as you know, with that infamous Mujahideen group, and they fought with them, and many of them died there as well. So this contradiction is evident in this sense, because if they're going to try to change Islam, you know what's going to happen. You're going to have rebellion. The Muslims will, some segment of the population will then turn to Mujahideen. So I don't know how Russia is going to handle this, but they're trying to secularize Islam, and it's not working. And so Putin, perhaps he may try to do something that to quell this possibility. And also, it's the contradiction. It has been in other Muslim states, you know, of course, like Afghanistan. They got spanked in Afghanistan. They went back in Afghanistan to try to be more partners with them, and so forth and so on. So they, of course, you know, their situation in Syria. They helped the Syrian government to stay in power by fighting the Mujahideen there. And you know the little conflict that arises between the Americans and the Russians when the ex-president Obama said that he was going to deal with the Syrian government, but when the Russians stepped in, he backed off, and the Russians basically went in, and the Americans did their thing too, as you know, in northern Syria in particular. But they began to protect, and they had running battles with many of the Mujahideen groups centered, especially the one major one centered in Syria. And this thing is still happening as we speak now. They took on, again, the famous groups there in Syria, and backing the Shia government and remaining at odds with the U.S. in the region. The U.S. and the Russians, you know how they are. They're two-bob, but they have a lot of similarities, but then they have dissimilarities. You know, they don't have some things that they just can't agree on, as you know, like what's happening in Ukraine. So they have their little situation. And I'm moving you to Bilad and Sudan, so please be patient. I'm just trying to give you a backdrop to understand Russia's role and what it's been doing, especially in Muslim conflicts. Here's one that is very interesting, brothers and sisters. Many of you may not know because they kept it quiet, but it's starting to come out. African Americans are starting to move to Russia. That's right, brothers and sisters. They're starting to move to Russia. And some notable African Americans were given instant citizenship. And Putin has made it known that the African Americans, and you guys look this up, do your research. This is very interesting. Why the contradiction? He's made it known that the African Americans are basically welcome there, and it's a haven for them. And this is a two-bob state. Now, you tell me what two-bob state that you know of is opening arms to African Americans in particular. You name one. I don't know of any. Russia is. And he's granted citizenship, and he's given other amenities to certain African Americans who have been troubled, who have had families slain in the United States, who've suffered from by police violence, you know, driving while black, shopping while black, working while black, all of this type of thing like this. And President Putin has been on record denouncing the American-style racial profiling. I saw his tape. It's open. He was there. He talked about it. He denounced it. He said his police won't do that. He was opening the door for African Americans to come. And there's now tapes in YouTube. You see, matter of fact, some nice looking sisters, African American sisters, have moved there. This one lady in particular was very, very beautiful. She moved to Russia. She's been there 1 year. And there's been other brothers. There's black entertainers have also moved to Russia. There's been notable athletes who have gotten instant Russian citizenship. You see, so Russians have their ways about them, and you can never put your hand on them and say you got them figured out, because you cannot, because they'll do one thing here, then they'll do another thing here. And perhaps this is by design. But He has been on record denouncing the racial profiling. He said his police don't do that. They will not do that. Where they see an African American and targeting, claim that he's doing something. I'm not talking about the situation with the famous basketball player. Now, I was prepped for this. If you are a gangster or something like this is not the place to go. If you are a drug peddler or drug user or something like this, as that our sister found out when she came there, she had some stuff in her thing, you know, and you know what happened. She got jailed for it. That country is very, very harsh about drugs. Okay, they don't care who you are. But if you're not involved in any of that, I think that if you, as a Western black man, African, and you want to go to live again in a Western type of society, you go to Russia, you may find some things that may be to your liking. The Muslims, that's another story. I've covered this before. I won't cover that now because this is not about Islam per se. This also about the African Americans and the asylum claims, because Putin has been on record again talking about situations of what's happening with the African Americans in particular, and he's expressed his concern many times in the open forum. Okay, he's talked about that, and he's chided the American government for his hypocrisy and his wanton murder of black folk. Now, again, how many Tubob leaders are doing that? How many are calling out the Americans in this situation? He's the only one I know of. And so he knows that the African American has suffered 400 years of brutalization. He knows that. And he urged that the blacks can live safely in Russia without all of the fanfare that has happened there, the lynchings and all the Jim Crow laws and all the new Jim Crow laws that's going on in the United States. Now, all of the police targeting and killing of black folk and so forth, choking to death black folk. And there's still now, it's come out reports, they're starting back to lynching again. And there's other reports about some ill-advised comments by some notable Tubob Americans who talk about slavery again. See, so, all these type of things like this is weighing heavy on many African Americans, and many of them want to leave and they don't know where to go. I'm not going to tell you where to go. My first inclination is because you are a black man and black woman, you should go to Africa. This is my take. You should come here to empower it, especially you brothers and sisters that got these skills that we need here desperately. Agriculture, security, architecture, governance, and all these type of things like this. Professors, teachers, we need this here in Africa. We desperately need these type of caliber of African Americans in particular to come here to do that. We need that here. This is my first, I would say to you come here first. If you can't make it here, then some will say, I'd rather go to Britain. You better look what's going on in Britain. British and the French are going through some serious racism like that. I mean, some hardened racism stuff that's coming out. You can't go to Spain. Spain has got a close ties with the Tubob police of America. And you know what has happened? They have profiled African Americans in Spain a lot. That's not a place to go. I will stay away from France and Britain, my personal opinion. Perhaps a goal may be you may check out Russia. That I'm just saying, if you can't live here, I would check it out first. I would check that out and see and weigh your options on that regard. Okay, and so forth and so on, and weigh your options too on your liking if you're a man in particular. Because if you don't mind about woman, you'll find a Russian wife easy there in Russia. Even though they're Tubob women, the brothers have no problem there as far as dating and marriage with Russian women. They like the brothers there. Believe me, it wasn't that way back when I was much younger, but it is today. Things have changed. Okay, now let's get into this. The Russians have now entered into Africa, and they're starting to go after the resources. So they've been making headway, going into areas where there are certain minerals, waterways, and so forth it needs. So it's been warming up to African leaders, especially in the Sahel region. And so they want to enter into a new agreement where they have indirect rules similar like that of the Americans. And so what they have done now, they've now entered into the fray of the Sahel region. And now we have another group here called, in English, it's called Wagner, but in Russian linguistics, it's called Wagner. Okay, Wagner. Wagner. In the Russian language, it's not Wagner, but in English, it's Wagner. See, Chasovanya. It's the Russian language. It said when you begin to speak this language, you'll see there's some tongue-tying letters and words how you pronounce things. But this is the Wagner group. I use English, and they are a mercenary group, brothers and sisters, and they're ruthless. And they have the full backing of the government of Russia. And that's now the new military wing that's entered into the fray, into the Sahel region. That's right, brothers and sisters. They're there. And right now they're fighting in Mali and in Burkina Faso as well. This Wagner group is nothing but sheer mercenaries. They are like a cleanup group. They come in, you pay them a certain amount of money. And again, remember the allegation against the Americans by many economists and many historians and scholars and so forth and so on. They said that the Americans profit off of war. Well, the Russians kind of do it as well, because they'll come into the fray, into the Sahel region, and their businesses pick up, their weapon sales pick up, their body armor, the ones that say they don't want the Americans stuff, then they'll take that. The Israelis are also involved in things like this as well. But the Russians have their business sector who profit off these insurgencies, believe it or not. See, so they are like the Americans in this regard, that when they get involved in these insurgencies, their business sector benefits off of this. And the Wagner group is one of these. They get paid off, and then whatever you want to protect its leaders, you want to keep democracy, and so forth and so on. This is why again they will not win, because as long as they are trying to push the democratic ways and means, it's not going to work, brothers and sisters. You heard me last couple of weeks. Just as we speak, they're looking over to the left, over here to the west. They're thinking what I'm going to do here. Now, here's Sudan flared up. When Sudan and time will calm down, suddenly Eastern Africa will flare up. Down in the southeast, Mozambique will flare up, or the Sahel and many other of the Western West African states will start to flare up, which it is every single day. So it can't get its foothold on a democratic ways of being. It's not going to work, brothers and sisters. It's just not going to work. It just won't work, because the rank and file are tired of it. But yes, those who are promoted by the West, especially by the Americans, who are pushing for democratic ways and means, it's not working. It's not working, brothers and sisters. If you look at it, it just don't work. And especially in Africa, it just doesn't work. These governments are directly or indirectly placed in, meaning the African governments, okay, not all, but especially in the Sahel region and in some other areas too. The Americans usher in a group under democratic ways and means, puppets, essentially puppets. That's it. They're quickly overthrown. Then they push in another group. It doesn't survive. This is what's happening in the Sahel region. And the French also have a hand in this as well. So they keep putting in these puppets, and you see what has happened. They fall by the wayside. And in this situation, and the Russians are seeing and looking at that. And I don't know how the Russians is going to handle this, but it's clear that since the Wagner group is there, that means they're going to put their mark on it and keep the democratic process. And I'll get into why that is here shortly. Uh, and brothers and sisters, when we see this too about the Sahel region in particular now, okay, all over Africa, the corruption and stuff is off the charts. We know that. The selected individuals who are allowed to govern under the indirect rule of the Americans, okay, they come in and they steal. Bottom line, brothers and sisters, this is a known fact. They steal the wealth. So it's like a new regime come in, the Americans don't care. As long as they're doing what they want and taking what they want, you can steal money all you want. But the people are fighting them. And then suddenly they're toppled. The military topples the government, or some other type of thing happens. Or maybe this government, this puppet government now is starting to go the other way. We know this to happen because why? We know that we know for sure that the Americans will fund coups in that country to overthrow who they consider a wayward leader, who now is not answering to the beck and call of the Americans anymore. So now this happens. This takes place where the American military trains leaders to, which traitors, as far as I'm concerned, they come in to overthrow the government. And you see the devastating effects of the violent overthrows of many governments, Libya, in Guinea. I mean, you look at it all over the place. It's the same process. Look at Sudan. It has not stopped since they were involved in ousting Bashir there in Sudan. So we know them to do this. We know they're there to fund opposition who's going to cater to their needs, to the American needs. So this is something, brothers and sisters, that it's an urgent situation, and it's a situation that we should be kept abreast upon. And who says that Africa should not be part of the curriculum or part of the learning for the African Americans in particular, and the Caribbean brothers and sisters? You're foolish. You think that Africa is, you don't need to know, because what happens in Africa indirectly affects you there as well. And that's been proven, brothers and sisters. What happens in the Western world with the black folk, it actually affects our African brothers here in Balade, Sudan as well. See, so we're intertwined, and we should know about one another. Now, the insurgent and Islamic insurgent groups, seeing this, they see the turmoil. They know the Americans, in particular the French, are putting in puppet regimes, and there is instant turmoil once the government has been known, as they've been found to be corrupted, stealing, police corruption, a horde of all kind of things happen. The Mujahideen Islamic insurgency revs up. And that's what we see in the Sahel region today, brothers. One of the things you heard me talk about, one of the aspects of that. And they see this, they organize and they call for jihad to remove the corrupted, fledgling Sahel regimes, because they know that the West is backing them. You see how dirty this is. And this is a fact. The Americans can no longer control and keep these puppets in power. Brothers and sisters, they usher in a new group and they are quickly thrown out. So Russia has now entered the picture to go into the, because of this vacuum, they're now putting their hand in there to see if they can keep these fledgling states afloat. This is where they are no different than the Americans in this regard. The Russians have appeared to be using a two-tier approach in the Sahel and North Africa in particular. They use a political agreements where Putin will come himself. He's not one type of two-bob where he doesn't want to shake hands with a black man, or he doesn't want to sit with a black man. He's not like that. He comes in here, he gets his hands dirty, so to speak, by coming down to the ground level and coming to African states and meeting with the African leaders here in Africa, and also calling them for détente, so to speak, in Russia. So he's not one of these two-bob where he considers us to be like foot slaves or something, and so forth and so on. He comes here and he puts his hand out and he shakes the hands of African leaders and hugs the African leaders and so forth and so on. See, so his approach in the political arena is quite different in a lot of ways than the American political thing. The Americans use their leverage, power, and their racism to keep us in check here in Africa. Bottom line, the Americans have a serious problem, brothers and sisters, the Tubab American and the Tubab government in particular. Let's talk about that for a minute. They have a problem with race. They have a problem with the black man. They don't know what to do with us. They try to kill us off. Now our birth rates are up. They try to jail us. And what happens? And then now you see a mass exodus. They don't know what to do with us. In Africa, they don't know how to treat the African leaders, as you see. They don't know how to treat the African leaders. They have a severe problem because of their innate racism, because they think that they are far superior. So therefore, they have problems with the black man. And this is resonated in Africa. Why the African leaders see them, he knows that they hate us because we're black. They know that. And so we have this friction, but out of fear of being assassinated, out of fear of invasion, many of them, yes, a boss to the American diplomatic corps and so forth. But that's starting to change. Look what happened in Libya. Even though they overthrew Gaddafi, what happened? The brothers there took it to the American embassy. You know what has happened there, and you know what they were doing in this embassy. I won't get into it. There's movies about that. There's a lot of documents. I won't get into that. But the brothers, the Muslim brothers there took on the American government and so forth and so on and whatnot. And and these things are starting to happen. And it's an unfortunate situation. The Americans, with all of its might and all of its financial means, if it was a moral player in this, brothers and sisters, they could really, truly run the earth. But now they're running the earth basically by fear. That doesn't work. When you have a wounded animal, it's going to strike back. And this is what is happening now. The wounded animals now starting to strike back. The Americans are being hit all over the place now. If their policies were that of genuine brotherhood, we wouldn't be talking about them in this regard. But it's not. And their racism, their white racism, is to their detriment in Africa and other places, but mainly in Africa. This Wagner group is quietly engaging the Mujahideen in Mali and in the Burkina Faso region area. And it must be noted that the stark differences in approach to Africa from the Americans and the Russian perspective is quite different in this regard. Americans, let's talk as it is. 400 years now, okay? Who could say I'm wrong here? The Americans are slavers. They had slavery going big time, taken and still depopulated. West Africa is still depopulated today, brothers and sisters. Bottom line, it's still depopulated because they took between 10 to 12 million Africans out, our ancestors out, and brought them into the Americas. See, so they are noted for their slavery. Regime changes. We just proved in many years they said no, we don't do that. But we know what they did in Palestine. We know what they did to our brother Morsi, Rahim Allah. What happened? He was basically overthrown. We know what happened in Palestine and whatnot. And they said, no, we're not involved in this. But you've seen the caption I showed you. The U.S. Congress now has chided the military and said, look, we know that you're funding these coups now. And in time, the soldiers are going to have to come to Africa to fight. And brothers, it's going to be a plague. It's going to be a graveyard for them. Because Malcolm said it right. They cannot win ground wars anymore. It's over. He said that back in the 60s, early 60s. And so the Americans are noted for these things. Regime changes, colonizers, staging murderous plots on African leaders. We know what has happened in history. Many of our brightest Africans were killed. Lumumba, you know, and their involvement, they say they weren't involved, but you know they were involved in Libya. You know, it goes on and on. They're noted for that. And also going after visionaries, upstarts, and also going after Islamic leaders because they don't want to see the Sharia law as the governance in any African state. They don't like that. And they try to overthrow any part like Sudan. Part of the problem in Sudan today is because the Sudan was running under almost about 60 to 70% under the Sharia law. But they began to go after the ex-president Bashir, and he began to break down the Sharia little by little to the point to where it caused problems. And there's another element that maybe many Americans and others don't believe, but I believe, and many of us in the billions do believe this, that there's the other hand in this, and the main hand is subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah. Because when you come in and you have the Sharia law, and then you go and backtrack so you can appease the disbelievers, and you remove his governance, and you start to accept the governance that he told you in the Quran don't accept, things happen, don't it? You see? And this is what has happened to my beloved Sudan, because I have relatives there. So, you know, and there's a I won't get too deep into the Fulani influence, but it is there. I won't get into that today, but I'll talk about that, inshallah ta'ala. I will talk about that. But they moved away from the Sharia. What happened to them? See, and now you have people running up and down the street talking about democratic ways and means, because democratic ways and means is not right. It's wrong, brothers and sisters. And you say, I know, I had somebody tell me this. I don't know why you keep telling us that. Well, let me break it down to you quickly. The democratic ways and means is not from the Torah. If you profess to be a Christian, you should be using the Torah. Subhanahu wa ta'ala said that he gave this guidance, the Torah, right? It is a book of guidance. He said that. He said that. It is a way of life that it'll lead you to to Jannah, to heaven. So why aren't Americans and the Europeans using it if they profess to be Christians? Because you should be using the Torah in your daily life. This is the contention between the Jews and the Christians today. You see? And this is true. So the Americans and the Westerners, the Tubab, they are not using the Torah. And this is a problem because Subhanahu wa ta'ala says, I gave this guidance. I gave this guidance, and it is a guide to help you. And the Torah is that because it is handed down by Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you follow that guide, that will lead you to the promised land, so to speak. So the Americans don't use that. And so all of these things, cause problems. And engaging into Islamic phobia, and so forth and so on. Having Muslim states, having other states with large population, the Americans urge them to go after the people like me and others who go to the masjid, who are devout Muslims. We're not arming nobody. We're not talking about overthrowing, because we know what's in the Sharia. We know this in the Sunnah. You know these two things. Our Prophet ﷺ was against this type of thing for Muslims to start to overthrow governments. You should learn the religion of Muslims here, because he was against that. It's only certain circumstances that you are allowed to do it. See, and he put a lot of conditions to that. See, and this is a thing that has to be understood. But yet we have governments going after people like this, but they leave the mujahideen alone because they can't take them out. So they take people out like me and others like us. They take us out, file all kind of things on us, say that we're criminals, we do all kind of things, when in fact it's not. The people who are actually doing the things, they can't touch them. They don't want to go one-on-one, man up with them. So they go after people like, I don't have no weapon. How can I go and fight? I'm not organizing anybody, and so this is what we're talking about here. And they tell these governments to go after your devout Muslims and to change Islam. And you see what the detrimental effect it's had on many African states. See, and it's wrong. And the Russians, to their credit, have not urged that. This is the paradox again about Russia. They have not urged that. The other thing about why the Americans have problems, they arrogantly announce what they're going to do next. It's so like nobody can stop them, but they forgot about Subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, they forgot about that. And he's brought forth a people now who's fighting them. That's right. They forgot about this element because they have vacated the Torah. They don't use that. See, so they don't even use Subhanahu wa Ta'ala's law. They don't use the Torah. We know they don't use the Sharia law. They know that. Sharia Islamia, they don't use that either. They use their own made-up laws. And Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is against that. He has stark words and measures against the people who use these things like this. See? And so now we have this problem here where the Americans come in and begin to announce. The Africans now are tired of it. The African leaders are tired of it. You come in to announce that you're going to put in a mega base in his land. The Mujahideen activates. The rank and file Africans don't like it, even though they may not have one dirham or one ducat or one penny in their pocket, but they don't want to see the Americans or any other Western power, Tuba power, come in into their country because they know they'll take it over. See? So this is a problem. And they come in and they make their moves and they arrogantly talk about things, and then they force acceptance. As you see now, they come behind the back door here and start trying to throw homosexuals down our throats. See, the Russians are not doing this. Why are the African leaders warming up to them? You see the differences between when Putin comes and the African leadership, I mean the Russian leadership coming to Africa. Look at the faces of the African leaders. Look at faces when the Americans are around them. You don't see this. You see this apprehension. You see fear. You can smell it, even though it's a picture. But when the Russians, you see smiles. You see actual a dialogue. With the Americans, you don't see that with the African leaders. Have you noticed that? And after the Americans leave from this discussion, the African leaders begin to talk. You see what I mean? And most of the time, the talk is not good. But when the Russians leave, they talk about, well, Putin has said this, he's guaranteeing this is what he's canceled our debt. He's helping to build our infrastructure. You see the difference in why I said this is a complex issue, brothers and sisters, about Russia, period, but Russia also entering into the fray in the Sahel region because of these factors. Offering infrastructure loans, okay, a military assistance and political advice and counsel, security agreements and all this. This is the Russians. The Russians present a clear and present threat and danger. Okay, danger, right, to who? To the Americans. That's right. So America's brutal reign of Africa is starting to come to an end. They can't kill enough. They can't sabotage enough. They can't overthrow enough governments to satisfy the empty hole that's in its heart. And the Russians are coming behind them now, okay? After the Americans leave, they wipe off themselves and they're not happy. And then when they see the Russians come, they begin to smile. I see the stark difference between the two. I'm not defending the Russian government because I'm only giving you the facts because I'm a Muslim. I have to present the facts as we see them. And that's what I'm doing here. And I see the stark difference between when the Russians come to visit our African leaders versus the Americans. Big difference. And now the crux of this. How do we start to find out about Russia's involvement? The Americans exposed this. They exposed the positions where Wagner is positioning in Africa, the mercenaries where they're fighting. That's how this map is, how I got the dots there, because now it's been revealed, because they want the people to know what the Russians are doing. Beforehand, they didn't do that. But now since the Americans are their power is starting to wane here in Africa, so they start to reveal what the Russians are doing. See, so this is a situation, and the Pentagon leaked this, so that way it came out to the Washington Post, who then broadcast about this situation with the Russians. You see, I don't know what you would think about that. Let me give you an analogy to this. Your African black brother, your African Otter brother, he's with you. You shake hands, you break bread. We have the same heritage, so to speak. But I go to betray you because since, you know, you're starting to do real good and I'm not doing good in one area, I go to betray you. This is what is happening here. And the Americans want to expose the Russians and what it's doing in Africa because it's making its headway. And Americans don't know what to do anymore. They just don't know what to do here anymore. They come here with a heavy stick, with a gun, and they put this thing to the African leaders' heads. They don't like it. They're starting to rebel against them. Now you got, not on top of that, you got the Mujahideen Islamic insurgencies running all over the place when the Americans said they were going to stop it. And because they poured the gasoline on the fire, we have insurgencies in 25 states now under the American tutelage. See, so I'm talking for what it is. And this situation has to be explored and looked at. I'm telling you what I know and what I'm giving you some of my synopsis of this and why my African brothers here in the continent are warming to the Russians. And I gave you the other aspect of this for the African American who's looking to get the heck out of the United States, but they still want to live under more Western type of society. I urge you perhaps to look to Russia. You know, because Britain is not going to be accepting of you. You can go there, and the French is not. Yeah, you can go there. You'll see what I'm talking about. The Russians, Putin has already said this, and we have many Americans who have now lived there, and they're on YouTube talking about Russia. That's for the African Americans who desire to leave, but they want to live in the Western confines. I'm not talking to Muslims. That's a different story. I won't get into that. But we have safeguards and we have rules when a Muslim goes to another non-Muslim country, that we have some rules about that. This is not the night for that. So the Russians, like the Americans, realize that the Islamic Emirates and the sultanates over there running through Africa, maybe within maybe 10 years, we do not know. It would eliminate both of them completely. You say, yeah, well, what are you talking about? Under the Sharia law, there's no governance from disbelievers. The disbelievers do not have any power inside an Islamic state. An emirate or a sultanate, they have no power. Can we have agreements? Yes, we can have agreements. We can have trade. Yes, we can have that. But they cannot indirectly rule our Islamic country. They cannot. It's forbidden under the Sharia law. Cannot do it. So both do not want to see an emirate that I was talking about before here. You remember here a couple of weeks ago, I talked about this issue here. Because you see here in the green here, over here to your right is Niger, and to the south here to your left is excuse me, Burkina Faso. I saw something, some notes here. I got to recognize some people here. I didn't see this. So anyway, this portion here, what I advocated here, is a hotbed. The Russians and Americans don't want to see the Emirates because, again, the Sharia law will factor them out. They can have trade, no problem. They can even have agreements and share information and you know, on common ground, common areas. All this is allowed under the Sharia, but they cannot do what they're doing in Africa today, because once a emirate is established or a sultanate is established, it's over for them in that regard. They just can't march in and start barking out orders telling you to, like the Americans, you better accept homosexuality or we'll do this to you. No. Because now it's out in the open, brothers and sisters. It's starting to happen. The minute we have the Americans come to push, and they push, then suddenly the most aggressive, the most ultra violent of us here on the continent activates. And that's what is happening now. And they'll kill you just as just as easy as turning on a light. Because of their actions, they have spurred these type of people to come up out of the dead, so to speak. Those who are fighting them now. What happened? Ask the Americans what happened in Niger. They killed them quickly. They didn't give a who they were. They killed them because they don't belong to them. They're disbelievers. They don't belong in Niger. So they assassinated them. You see what I'm talking about? The Frenchmen who were in Mali, who took our sisters, kidnapped them, or whatever the situation may be, human trafficking. They were executed. The Mujahideen found them in there and executed them and saved the sisters. You see, because of their actions, the most ruthless of us are now coming up to the forefront to fight them. And what did Americans do? They come to fight people like me and scholars and imams. See, this is funny, isn't it? They come to hit me with a big stick. But yet, why don't they go and they can't go and handle Mujahideen? See, this is what I'm talking about. And I have to talk to you as it is, brothers and sisters. The most ruthless of us, or now you see what's happening in the Sahel region. Those people are ruthless, brothers and sisters. You have the Fulani Mujahideen groups, and some of those brothers are ruthless. Okay? You have the Tuareg, they're ruthless as well, many of them. You have the Afro-Arabs. All of these have now come up to start to fight the Tubab because of their actions. This is what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. Okay? This is what I'm talking about. And so we have to look at it for what it is and whatnot. And we have to learn from that, because the ultimate goal for us is peace. The ultimate goal for us is peace. And how do we achieve the peace? We cannot achieve peace under democratic ways and means. We cannot achieve peace under the economic system of the Americans and the Russians. Not the Russians, but the Chinese and so forth. We cannot. It doesn't work. It leads you straight to poverty, failed banks, failed currency, and so forth and so on. You see? So this is out. And because of this, and the heavy-handedness of 400 years, now the most ruthless of the Africans and African Muslims are now coming up from the dead to fight them. And they can't deal with them. Brother, they are in 25 states now. 25 African states. And all of these groups are ruthless. Okay? Bottom line, ruthless. And you have to look at it for what it is. See? So, I'm giving you this bird's eye view of this, and so that you can discern. And I'm talking harsh, because weeks back I talked against the Mujahideen, the ruthless ones I'm talking right now. But I'm talking about the West in this regard. But I'm talking about the Russians too, because they now have been exposed. There was a lot of rumors about their participation. Now the Americans exposed their positions. So I'm talking about it. See? So, and the Sharia will stop all these resources: bauxite, diamonds, gold, uranium. All of that will stop. The Mujahideen take over Burkina Faso. They take over Niger. What happens? The French are thrown out. They won't be able to take the uranium out of there for nothing and go enrich their country. It's over. If they want to buy it, they can buy it at market value, where it enriches the land, because that's the Sharia law. That's what it says. We enrich our population with our wealth, not what it is under democratic ways of means, where only the cronies, the government and the cronies get the benefits. The people don't get anything. We suffer. But they enrich with 6 or 7 bank accounts, offshore accounts all over the place under different democratic ways and means. See, this is what we're talking about in this regard, like this, and it's not good. Under the Sharia law, it's forbidden. Even a person who's in the government, they will get their hand cut. Okay, bottom line, if the circumstance is right by the Qadi who reviews that government official under the Sharia law, and you stole the money from the people, oh brother, you're in serious trouble. You're in serious trouble under the Sharia. See, we don't have those means under democratic ways and means. We don't have that because it's protected by the West. See, we don't have that. So I'm getting close here to closing, brothers and sisters. I want you to acknowledge some people here. My brother here, Kakun, Salam Alaikum, Anzurama, my brother, how you doing? My sister Amina, Salam Alaikum, Rahmatullah Katu, Lil sister Oti, how you doing? Thanks for showing up. And how you doing, brother Billings? How you doing? Yeah, I see your comment here. And thank you for showing up today for my talk. The staunch, hardened Muslim leadership. Now, you should, again, for your education, anytime you have combatants, brothers and sisters, we have under Islamic rules, okay, especially under our Sunnah and of our Prophet Islam, and we had our best general who was Khalid, okay, Khalid say Allah, that's what we called him. He gave us guidance that he received from Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and from our Prophet Islam about dealing with people who are your enemies. Okay, you have to understand them. You cannot arrogantly go past them. You have to understand them. The staunch and hard Muslim leadership, you have to understand them, brothers and sisters. You have to understand them, what makes them tick. Just like the Tubab, you want to, Malcolm said, we all know the Muslim scholarship, we know. If you want to understand the Tubab, who you talk to. Remember Malcolm, Rahim Allah, Malcolm X, as everybody call him, he understood them. You talk about Jewish ways and means, who do you go to? Malcolm, because he understood them very well. You see? So this is what you have to do. And for us as Muslims, these people who are mujahideen and others who are just fighters, we have to understand what makes them tick. We have to understand them, brothers and sisters. And we don't use the West and look at the LA Times or Washington Post to understand our brothers. No, you as Muslim, you go to the Quran and Sunnah. Brothers in Islam, you go to the Quran and Sunnah to better understand the Muslim leadership who are the Mujahideen now. That's how you learn about them. See, I'm just giving you that guidance there because I'm just giving hypothetical. If I had to talk to some of my brothers in the Mujahideen groups, hey, I'm not going to be using the democratic ways and means. No, I'm going to go. I'll have my Quran and I'll have my Sunnah here. I'll have both here, and we will talk in this regard, and we will speak in the Arabic language on top of that, because we talk about technical issues in Islam. We talk in Arabic language, because this was the language that was revealed to our Prophet ﷺ. So I would deal with them in that regard. I won't come in there talking about the laws in LA or what the Pentagon has said. No, I will go with the Quran and Sunnah. This is what they hear. This is what they know. And their ears are open. When you start reading the verses of the Quran, their ears open up wide. And when you begin to utter the words of Subhanahu wa Ta'ala, their ears open up, their eyes get big. Because they know that you're talking the truth, because you brought the book that they are supposed to be adhering to. This is the fault of the leadership of the West. They keep bringing Tubab to the table. They keep bringing hypocrites to the table. The hypocrites don't use the Quran and Sunnah. They use what their handlers tell them to use. They tell them, okay, you use this way is me to go talk to Mujahideen, and it doesn't work. Why do you think, like Sheikh Gumi in Nigeria, why do you think he made a headway with Mujahideen in northern Nigeria? Because he's a scholar. He came in with the Quran and Sunnah, and the brothers melted. See, you see, now you understand what I'm talking about here. This is one of the elements I've been harping about for weeks. You must bring people who understand these mujahideen, and the Russians don't understand them. Okay, even though yes, they're allowing Muslims to come, but you see what has happened. They're starting to try to change Islam. They do not want the Sharia either in Africa. They don't want to see Sharia law. They don't want to see that. So now we are in grips with 25 states of mujahideen. So we need to understand them. And I'm telling you now, we have a guy. When Sheikh Gumi went to go talk to some of them, what happened? He got many of them to stop doing what they're doing because he quoted the Quran and he used Sharia law and the Sunnah of our Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam. And he stopped marauding. This is one avenue that the West won't take. And the arrogance of the Americans, in particular, they think they bring a Tubab disbeliever to the table to talk to hardened Muslims who have been killing, okay? Killing to establish a Islamic state, so to speak, a emirate of some sort. And you bring them, a disbeliever, to the table to talk to these brothers, it don't work. Sheikh Gumi came in. He didn't have an army behind him. He didn't have the police behind him. He didn't have guns. He didn't have bombs. He didn't have all kind of aerial madness from the Americans, surveillance vehicles. He didn't do that. He came in as the Sheikh Islam and as a scholar, and he was well received. And he came in, and many of them, these groups stopped. Now, what does that tell you, brothers and sisters? What does that tell you? See, so I'm giving you all of this, and it may be harsh to some. Some may not like this, but I have to talk from an Islamic point of view in this. And we must be made aware, because you have a new player. You have the Russians. You need to study them. That's what I've been doing. The Muslims, in particular, anytime you have anybody to enter your land, you better know who these people are. And the Russians are here. The Russians are not Americans, okay? Don't think in that regard. Yeah, they may be Tubab, but they're not Americans. You need to understand them. See, what they stand for, what their weaknesses are, and what their strengths are. And I believe our Mujahideen groups are doing this, because they're taught very well by their scholars and imams who they have among them. They probably are starting to educate them in this regard. See, so this is something that I'm just talking to get you to understand. The Americans and the Russians, they have their problems, and they won't be able to take the Mujahideen groups out, brothers and sisters. I'm sorry, they can't. It's not going to happen. They won't be able to take them out, even if they combine forces. It's too many. It's too many Mujahideen groups. It's just too many. And Africa is so vast, they cannot. And both are basically clueless on how to rid the land of the Mujahideen. You can't do it. When you got 40 to up to 60%, according to who gives these specifications, of Muslims in Africa now, how? Africa is too massive. And 25 states are up in flames, so to speak. Look what's happening in Sudan. Now, the Americans heavy in that. And the Russians are there, as you saw in the map. I gave you that map showing you that the Russians are in Sudan. If you look over to your right, there you see that dot where you see Egypt, which is to the north, and over to your right, over here to the east, you see that dot there, Sudan. They're there. See, so this is again something that we should understand, and we should ponder, and we should try to get a better angle and to learn about this. Our brothers and sisters in Sudan are suffering greatly, brothers and sisters. They're suffering greatly right now. And many have been killed, innocent have been killed. And I will get into this because there's some players in this too that you don't know about. And there's a big Fulani factor there. My community is everywhere in Africa, brothers and sisters. And their jihad just has not stopped since 7/11. They're there in Sudan as well. So that is something, again, I will touch on, inshallah, ta'ala. Okay, the bullet, as I said, cannot stop this. The Islamic insurgencies are too many to quell, and over a wide range of the continent. It's too much. Financially, it's so costly. How are you going to run the Africa and try to colonize all of it? You're going to need black faces to do it. They have that right now, but the people are starting to rebel against that. The Russian ambitions to keep these insurgencies at bay by using the mercenary group, the Wagner group, it's a short-term fix, but not a long-term fix. It's not going to work, because as the Wagner groups begin to get defeated, The Russians won't have too many options except bringing in their own troops in there, and they already have enough trouble as it is, and they have aspirations in Europe. We all know the Russians have aspirations in Europe, as Poland, as Germany. It's been talked about. So I don't know how much they want to bring a lot of troops into Africa, because it's not going to work for them to try to come here to colonize all of it. They don't have the money, the strength, or the power to do it, and Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is not going to allow it. I don't believe that. They will not. Matter of fact, it's not that I guess. I know it won't happen, because we're getting too close to the ends of time. And our Prophet has given some guides, brothers and sisters. He told us the events, and these events have passed. See, and we're getting close now to these other events of the Islamic takeover of the world. And it's coming. It's coming. Now, I got to cover this, brothers and sisters. I got to cover this part here, because this, to me, is very, very disheartening. You see the map here. I got this in English so you can discern. I'm closing here. You see Chad here, there in the center there. You see Niger, and then you see over and to your left, there's the Burkina Faso. What has happened there is there has been a killing. Ruthless killings just took place there. And my understanding from what information I got, I'm trying to confirm it, and I haven't confirmed it, is that, again, another Fulani village has been decimated and the kinfolk killed in this latest, attack. And they don't know who did it. They said the people came in fatigues. They looked like army people, and they came in and they began to blaze up the place. So Burkina Faso, now look at this, brothers and sisters. This is what remember what I told you? Remember what I was telling you the other day? I said that why don't we give the emirate Burkina Faso, which is in the green, to your left here is the Burkina Faso. To your right is Niger. 40% of Burkina Faso is already taken by the Mujahideen groups. The Tuareg, the Afro-Arabs, and the lesser extent, the Fulani Mujahideen groups. You see what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters? This is why the news like this, when we get it, we should pass it around so you can understand it. Because you're not going to get a lot of good news, and you won't understand who the players are. When I hear there's a conflict, me as an African historian, as a Muslim, when I hear there's a conflict, I want to know the people who's involved, especially here on the continent. When I hear a name, the Bambara, the minute I start to go to look into the Bambara. I want to know who they were aligned with in the past. Who were there? Who were their brightest people? Who were their mujahideen? What did they do in the past? And I would try to marry up what has happened in the past to what is happening in right now, currently. The other group, who's the combatants, I want to know about them as well. This is how we have to approach that when we have conflicts. And the bullet is not always necessarily the best way to do it. Because if these people still have loyalties to something, to another group, you should exploit that and understand that. And Sudan is filled with a lot of mithaqs between many not ethnic groups, but villages, which we could call Kabahil in Arabic language. And there's intertwining relationships. This is in play in Sudan today, brothers and sisters. Okay, this is why it's so complicated. And you got some who are black as the night, and they're called Arabs. And you got some who are lighter skinned, they're not Arabs. And it's confusion. You see, you got some speak Arabic language here, and some not speaking Arabic language. They speak Arabic language as a second language because they have to, they have to live and go about and buy and so forth and so on. See, so these are some of the things that I'm talking about here and how you have to look at that. But Burkina Faso is a hotbed, brothers and sisters. 40% of its land now is already controlled by Islamic insurgents. You have the Tuareg, the Afro-Arabs, and you have the Fulani in the mix as well there. So this is a very, very complex situation. And the Russians, again, brothers and sisters, are involved. And what extent they'll be able to do, I don't believe that they'll be able to do many things um, to help to quell the violence. They won't be able to do anything. Will they be able to save Mali? I don't believe that. I don't believe they're going to be able to save Mali, because as you heard me say last week, let me see. Yeah, here we go. This is what I think is going to happen. You saw the emirate I had there in the green in the first map. You see, you had Niger and Burkina Faso. What I believe, taken by the sword, the new emirate will be this here. You see how big is the spread? And I believe in my heart that may transpire. I believe that they're going to start running roughshod, and they'll start taking land, because now they don't care. They begin to take land and annexing it. See, and I talked about this and whatnot last week. So the emirate is all of these groups that we see fighting today. All of them want to have a sultanate or emirate, and that's it. And the old ways and means that have been used by the West, they don't want this anymore. This is why this situation is so complex and very deadly, brothers and sisters. I know I was long today. Those who follow me, thank you for showing up. I really, really appreciate that. And those who will show up in the future to listen to this talk. And it may be too technical. And those who have apathy towards Africa, especially if you are a black man and black woman, you shouldn't be that way. No, no, no. Because Africa is you and you are Africa. Bottom line. You cannot diss Africa and say, well, you know, that's over there. I'm an American. No. You heard me say this 1,000 times now. The problem that we have in America today is quote unquote African American. And I asked the question, the American part has been settled because you're born there and you have the American passport. But how about the African part? How can you be whole without understanding the African part of you? See, this is my contention that I always raise with my brothers and sisters there. See, and so this is a problem that has to be solved. And we should learn about Africa because it affects you. The Americans are doing the exact thing they're doing in Chicago, LA, Texas, Washington, D.C., all over the place. They're doing the same thing here in a lesser extent, but they're still doing it. And I may talk about something that may be shocking to you that I've covered about this issue. That the white racism that you're experiencing there, that I experienced for 50 years over there in the United States and stuff, it's making its way here. And it's been in place for a long time. If Malcolm, our dear brother Rahimahullah, was still alive, he would educate us on that. Because it's still around, and it's making its way here to Africa, and its various forms. Don't be surprised you start to see racial profiling when we start to come here. It's going to happen, and it's already started to happen. See, on the urging of this racist American government. And it is sad, really, really sad that our government, the American government, has come to this point. And now they have so many enemies. The Russians are not their friends. Yes, they may talk, but they're not. Russians come behind them trying to take over what they had. The Americans now expose the Russians, saying, hey, let me tell you what the Russians are doing now. Now they've exposed them, gave up their positions where the Wagner group, the mercenary groups are fighting and what they're doing. See, so we see all of these things, and brothers and sisters, you know, we live in difficult times now. So just be mindful of that and get a well-rounded education and teach your children. Because one thing about Black folk, we're very ignorant about things outside of our area. That's one thing about that with us is very troubling. Teach your children about Africa. Teach it so they will have, because things will change in their lifetime, things will change dramatically, and it will help. What helped me about Africa is because as a boy, I always had interest in Africa. I kept studying about Africa and so forth and so on. See, so it helped me today. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave me this, and alhamdulillah, he gave me this, and I studied. And it's helped me to basically to adapt here to Africa because I was already like an African already, even though I was wayward in a lot of things, but I still had Africa in my heart, you see? So we should educate our children to understand what's going on here. So when they get to school, when a racist teacher or a Uncle Tom begin to talk bad about Africa by saying things, you be able to say, no, professor, no, so-and-so, this is not the way it is. This is what is happening there. See, our children should be apt in understanding Africa. And I gave lessons about this. I won't get into that today. So brothers and sisters, thank you for those who showed up today and those who will show up in the near future. And I will conclude this segment here, and I will add another segment about this again about but this will be different. The Sahel and Russia. I gave you something to give you some good education on this, and do your research on that. And I'll cover some other topics here, inshallah. But the one in Sudan is a big one, brothers and sisters. It's coming up, inshallah. The one in Sudan is very, very interesting. There's some things happening on the ground there that you should know what's happening here in Balad, Sudan. And you as a black man, in particular an Afro-Arab, you should be made aware of this. I'll leave you with that. Assalamu alaikum. Rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.